Hello, my name is Joanna. I'm 23 years old and I live in France. I would like to talk to you about my first experience as a young teacher in France, and I would like to talk to you about bullying in schools. You know that there are students who are bullied sometimes in schools, but you probably don't know that there are also young teachers who are bullied in schools, and it's a reality. So I would like to talk to you about this, but first I would like to demolish some of stereotypes I hear every day in France and that exist too in other countries. So people just often think that teaching is the best job of the world, and teachers never work and are always on holidays because they have only 20 hours of teaching per week, and they have many weeks of holidays in France, 16 weeks, and they think that they are very good paid for this. But it's not the reality. It's not an easy job. So I will just tell you about my experience. But first, I would like just to explain why I decided to become a teacher and to show you it was a vocation. So I have always been passionate by history since I was 5 or 6, and I first wanted to become an archaeologist as I love antiquity. But I realized very fast it was very complicated to become one, and I couldn't have a secure job with it. So I gave up this idea, and I just kept in mind for passion to do just next to my job. But I just gave up this idea. And when I turned 15, I had a wonderful teacher of history and geography, and he made me want to become a teacher, even if I didn't like geography. But 3 years after, when I was in my first and second years of university, I met a wonderful teacher in geography that really made me love this subject. So I really decided to become a teacher at that time, and I decided to graduate 2 bachelors in history and in geography. And I entered into a masterclass for preparing the examination to become a teacher in secondary school. And yes, I passed it. So I just entered into my second year of master degree, and I had to do a work experience of 9 hours per week in a high school. So you should just think 9 hours on 2 classes, it's about 70 students. This is nothing. But in fact, at the same time, this 9 hours, I just stayed 20 hours in the schools, and I had 15 hours in university, my lessons for students to prepare, my papers to mark, and a thesis of 80 pages to do for university. So you see, this was very overwhelming. And I just have to precise something because I have to be clear. I was very motivated to become a teacher, and I wasn't that kind of person that don't work. I always been a hardworking girl. So just wanted to clarify this before just explain my work experience. So I started the school year in beginning of September, and I was a bit stressed because I had 2 things that just stressed me. The first one, it was that I never did a lesson for student before, and no one never teaches how to do it. So I was very stressed about it, and it was also because I learned my level classes only one week before the beginning of school year, so I had to prepare my lessons very quickly, whereas I didn't know how to do this. So it was very stressing. And the other thing, it was that I didn't have an internship supervisor yet, and people from national education just failed, and they first gave me an internship supervisor that wasn't in the high school anymore. So I was alone for the 2 first weeks of my work experience, and I had to just improvise. And the very first day of class, I had gone to hell with one of my 2 classes that created a havoc from the very first hour with me, and I would have never imagined something like that. I really discovered that in the that this class was the worst of the high school. I discovered it in a teacher's lounge, and one of my colleagues already put an hour of detention to one of the students. And if you want to know, this high school was considered as a sensible and very difficult high school, and it was very bad in terms of results and motivation. And I think I wasn't prepared to confront this. And how could I have been? In university, just teachers prepare us only in terms of contents, not in terms of discipline or pedagogy. So that's why when I went home for the very first day of my teaching life, I cried a lot, and I cried all the weekend, and I felt very depressed. And I had a pit in my stomach each time I went out the subway and just approached to the high school. And I knew that there was no respect for me, and I felt it. And the other class I had was very nice, and I was cooler with the students because they're nice, and I had to be strict with the other, and just react immediately with my colleagues. And for weeks and weeks, I remember I went to school with this fear, and I went home the nights and I cried each day, each times. And 2 weeks after this, I finally had an internship supervisor among my geography and history colleague, and it was a 55 years age man who was very impressive with his physical appearance, who has a loud, deep voice, and he saw that I had difficulties with my students, so he began to go in the back of my classroom to just observe me during my lessons. And we made a deal that he would come every Monday morning, and he tried to give me advice, but he didn't really know what to say, as he had never been internship supervisor before. So he always repeated the same things and never said something positive. It was always negative. And moreover, I had a very difficult relationship with him because he made me feel like a student and him like my teacher, whereas we were just colleagues, and I felt an unbalanced relationship where he was just superior than me, and I didn't like this. And he often screamed at me and couldn't speak nicely with me, and yes, it was really, really, really hard. But I don't complain because I know a French teacher friends and Unimate that just has been insulted and humiliated by his internship supervisor. And the worst thing is we can't say nothing because we know that we have to write our work experience report, and our teacher fates just rest in the hands. And yes, my internship supervisor wasn't a good one, and he always told me that he said the headmaster very negative things on me. And he also told me that there are colleagues that didn't appreciate me because they thought I was too much intellectual. And I really didn't understand what that means. But one of my colleagues told me that she learned the same thing when she was younger. And she told me we couldn't trust colleagues, and we had to be careful. We have to be careful when we speak in the teacher's lounge because they could just hear us and just repeat what we say. So she told me that they were probably jealous of me because I was young and I had yet a freshness with my projects and my studies that they didn't have anymore. And many of them are just in the same school for years and years, and they stagnate in their career and jobs and just put their lessons years and years. And yes, they're just jealous of that because they just are birds. And yes, it's very annoying. And yes, she told me that. So from this day, I became very mistrustful, and especially when I learned that monitors just repeated behind my back to the headmaster that there is a bloody mess in my classroom. So I just wanted to tell them that mind your own business and just go teach in my place and we'll talk about it. But I was very disgusted that there are people like that in a school. And the only person I trusted in this high school was my history and geography colleague, and also a teacher of English. And each Monday, after our last and most horrible hour of the day, I remembered that we were reunited in our high school and in our classroom to talk, and that really reassured me to see that I wasn't the only one to know difficult hours. But I really discovered that situation in December because a few colleges admitted in that period that they cried the first years of their teaching life, and it was very difficult, especially the first year. So I understood that this is something that no one talks about in teachers' lounge or in public, and I learned it outside the high school and also in private conversations. And I think that teachers are ashamed of that, and because it shows just in a way that they fail in their jobs, and yes, it sounds like a sign of weakness. But I also feel that people discover it, and especially the headmaster, and can just call a school inspector or just put a bad perception on them. And I even learned that a training teacher just decided to suicide a few years ago in my university because it just suffered too much and didn't manage to do his job properly. And yes, he was under pressure, and no one talks about that. It's like a taboo, and if you ask a headmaster, he would tell you everything is okay in his high school, even if it's not the case. And yes, you can see that inside there's a hidden face of the school that no one knows. We always say that there, yes, we always see that there is a bright face, but in fact, there is a hidden face that is more negative. And this is a system where you have to fit the mold, or one does everything to get out of it. So yes, I learned it with my own experience. Because as I had problems with my students, I didn't have had the support of my hierarchy, and my internship supervisor was always on my back, just keeping an eye on me and repeating every mistake to my headmaster. And it was like a big brother that was watching me, and it was stressing. And one day I've been convened to a meeting between his assistant and my internship supervisor, and it was bad hour for me really, because they weren't glad of my failure in discipline. And as I put 4 hours of detention to two students, they wanted to take revenge, so they invented a story in which I let students smoke in my classroom, and that was very completely false. But the assistant headmaster and the headmaster were very suspicious about me, and fortunately, for once, my internship supervisor just stood up for me and said I would never let this happen. But yes, they both forced me to go in the back of my classroom of my colleagues who had the same student of me, to observe their ways of discipline and just perhaps improve myself. So I did it, but I didn't want to do this before because I thought that it could only demolish a bit more my authority. But the assistant headmaster just ordered me to do this, so I didn't have choice anymore. So from this day, yes, the student just I think understood that there is something special because I was in the back of a classroom. So I think they understood I was a trainee teacher. That's why they often ask me if it was my first year or how old I was, and I always avoided the question because if I was only 7 or 4 years for a few months more than them, I knew that I would lose my credibility. But they went until putting a high-pitched sound in my classroom to see if I could hear it or not. Because if I could, that just meant that I couldn't be more than 30 years old. And yes, they did that, but it's nothing compared to what I lived during this year. Just imagine students that stand up always, that walk in class, that shout all the time, that threw things through the classes and threw spitballs on you and them and left classroom dirty with papers on the floor and soda cans. Just imagine students that make animal shrieks, just whistle during your lessons. Imagine teaching in a racket, have to stop every time because they don't want to listen. Just imagine having students that insult you of dirty bitch, rolling a cigarette in the classroom, listen to music or provoking you, and even giving you the finger in front of every student that can acclaim them like your hero. Just imagine ending an hour of teaching and noticing that your scarf has disappeared. And for this story, I was very shocked because I just went to see the headmaster, but he did nothing. And he said to the chief supervisor, "I'm sure no one never touched her Misty's scarves." So he told that to the chief supervisor, and I saw the chief supervisor and I told her, "Oh yes, it's sure, my scarf is gone alone to finish behind the cupboard." But I was very shocked by the lack of support I had from the hierarchy, and one of my colleagues was also shocked because, yes, the headmaster did nothing, and she even went to see the headmaster to let move us, but it changed nothing. And I really understood that the headmaster hated me. But I really became sicker and sicker of this system, and I was very depressed, and I really discovered that you're perfectly alone in this job and you can only count on yourself. But so this is a kind of bullying for trainee teachers, and now I would like to talk to you about other forms of bullying. You meet all sorts of teachers in schools, and I heard a few of my colleagues just who didn't hesitate to show themselves racists or bullies, speaking about students or talking to students. I remember when I was in teachers' lounge, I heard just teachers talking about Muslim after Charlie Hebdo's attacks, and they said, I quote, they said, they are all women's and we have to teach to them, it sucks. And that really shocked me a lot because I didn't imagine that there are teachers who were racists. That really shocked me. And that really shocked me because I know that in our high schools there were more than 80% of our students who were from Muslims confession. And the other example that is also bullying for me is during one of my lessons, one of my students just told me that he was a shit because he had difficulties in many subjects. But I stopped my class and tell him that he never had to say something like that. So he answered me that it was the truth and he was nothing. And he told me that one of my colleagues told him that, and he would never do something good in his life. So I look at him and I just answered, "I don't want to know who told you that, but I don't want to hear that from your mouth or whatever mouth. Everything has skills for something. And it's not because you have difficulties or you are not good in schools, but you will do nothing in your life." So yes, after this lesson, I just tried to discover more about this colleague that just told that, and I discovered that this is a teacher who was known for bullying yes, and I was really shocked about it, and that's what really shocked me. It was also when I was in teachers' lounge and I heard that some teachers told that they would put bad notes to students that didn't care, and yes, that really shocked me because I'm not like that. I'm quite rather a kindly teacher and perhaps even too kindly, and students just take advantage of it. But for me, the teaching job is not shooting students and making them progress. And I just want to help them the best way I can do. And I don't say it's easy, but I always try to be like that in this year. So this is the kind of bullying in schools. And just to return to my work experience and my year, things were also difficult in university because my teachers of university just learned that I had difficulties in my work experience as many of my mates, and they began to become cold with us and treat us like lepers, and they refused to give us a letter and they support because we wanted to just have a free year the next year to pass another exam to become a teacher, but the highest diploma teaching diploma in France. But he didn't want to make us a letter because they refused to jeopardize their standing if only we didn't get tenure as teachers. So from this day, they talked to us with very coldly and badly, and we really had to fend for ourselves. So it was near March. I decided to take my courage in both hands and to fight, and I began to reset myself in high school with students and with my internship supervisor. And I went in to see my thesis director and to have a better subject for my thesis and more feasible. And I did it for the first months. I spent days and nights on it, and I finished my year with students, and yes, it was better, and I was less depressed. And finally, I managed to do 220 pages for my thesis, and I had the best note in my uni class. And yes, it was a victory for me because no one in university or in high school just supported me, and I managed to get tenure as a teacher. So it was wonderful, and people in university just accepted that I prepared the aggregation, the highest teaching diploma in France, and yes, I was very happy, and it was incredible to think that I managed to finish the year. But unfortunately, just one of my mates just has been fired of national education. It wasn't because he has done many mistakes, but it's because he had a lack of discipline like me, and there are too many training teachers next year, so I haven't had enough place, and yes, he can't do another year as people can do, and the other reason he can't get tenure because he hasn't managed to do his thesis because he had very difficult classes and he was in a very bad, difficult junior high schools, yes, and yes, I was very disgusted to know that because he was a brilliant person, and yes, his lessons was perfect. So yes, my teaching experience was not very good, but the best lesson I learned is showing authority and being clear on the rules from the very first day of school year. And the very first day is the most important. And you don't imagine, but if you don't if you don't if you are not just rude, if you are not severe or just strict, just student will enjoy it, and you couldn't just improve in the year. It will be very difficult. But for example, the horrible class, and at the end of its school, it was become the most pleasant class, and the another spot one who was coolest. The coolest class was the worst one at the end of the school. And why? It's because I have been stricter as all of my colleagues with their horrible class all the year, whereas I have been too late with the other one. And the ultimate proof of it, it's the really kind message I found when I returned to school to invigilate national exams, and I found in my fillet cabinet a little message of this class, and they wanted to thank me for the year and all the support I gave them for their theater project, and also the all the support I just gave them during the year. And I also have students that make wanted to have me next year, and they were very sad learning I left the high school. And a few ones also told me that they loved my lesson, and I was a great teacher, and they never managed to succeed in history and geography before knowing me. But thanks to me, they just managed to progress, and it was really touching. And I think it's the most beautiful thing that a teacher can just receive from students. And if I could help a few ones or many, I'm just happy and I did the job. So yes, now what is the hidden face of teaching, and there is bullying, and you see that it's not as fun as people just can think, and perhaps it's even negative sometimes. And just it's like that. I think it's not the only jobs that had negative parts. I think every job has negative parts, but this negative part of teaching is not very known. So that's why I wanted to share my experience. And yes, my first experience as a young teacher was just very good, but I just talked with many teachers I know that are my friends, and they just tell me that yes, students are rude nowadays, and young teachers' conditions are not easy, and people just do everything to disgust us, whereas they just miss teachers. And yes, I can just tell you that many teachers leave that situation, and every teacher really already had a difficult class or a bloody mess hour once in their career. It would be, I think, a lie to say the contrary. So yes, I also know that French people that just decided to give up this job when they discovered the bad system, and I can understand them. But as for me, I don't really like the system, but I don't want to change job for nothing in the world, because yes, I like sharing my passion, and I just like working with my students, and even if there are a few ones who are rude, but I just like sharing my passion with them and just help them to progress. But I just don't want to stagnate all my life in my job, and I just want to move up, because I think I couldn't stay with this low salary I have in the beginning of our teaching career. And because I think that after 5 years of studies and difficult exam pass, I think that 1,300 euros per month is not enough. And yes, I think that's why I just want to pass this highest difficulty exam I already talked about, because it could allow me to see new doors open to me for one day, and especially in preparatory classes for advanced studies in arts and literature. And I also want to teach in other languages like English or just German. And I also want to go abroad for a year to see how teaching works in other countries, because I know that teaching in France is not the best. So I want to learn from my foreign colleagues. And why not also becoming an internship supervisor one day, to avoid overtraining teachers to have a bully as I had, or as a friend I had also had. So yes, and just for people who want to become a teacher one day, I just hope my testifying has not disgusted you of the job, but really rather prepared you for what is expecting to you. I think that young teachers are not enough prepared for the real condition of the job, and I would have loved to know all these things before. And yes, perhaps I would have been differently last year. But I wanted also talked in the name of most of young and new and trainee teachers who just suffer in silence, and teachers who did in the past and never talked about it to anyone. Just don't stay alone. You can talk, you perhaps don't know, but various teachers chat exist in the internet, and yes, you can talk about your problem, and you can have in our school, and you can have advice from other teachers, and you're not alone. And in France, there is one called NeoProf, but in other countries, I don't know. But I'm sure of it exists, and I just encourage you to go on it. And yes, most of all, I just wanted to show to people who are not in this machine that being a teacher nowadays is not easy, and make you all think about it. So yes, so friendly as we can be, just educate your kids or teenagers is not an easy job, and that doesn't make you smart to give it attention on anything. And yes, teachers are humans, and sometimes we suffer from school violence when we are insulted. And we also suffer when we have parents that fall on our back because they prefer just believe lies of their kids than our words. And I don't say that there are no bullies among us, but most of us are like you, and we do have feelings. We are sensitive, and yes, however, just when we have to teach, we have to get the suit of an actor and just go on stage. Yes, I think that a teacher is like an actor, and he has to play a role that is not himself, and he must have the power to seduce the crowd, just show many feelings to be credible, and he has to control his emotion, and there is a problem on anything. And yes, he has also to improvise sometimes, but most of all, he has to have the vocation to be able to teach. And yes, I think that I, we can't do this job if we don't have the vocation. Otherwise, you probably would make crowds of students unhappy. So, as for me, this is the fire of passion that's still burning inside me that makes me continue in teaching. Because I think that if it wasn't my vocation, I think I would just stop everything. And I just count on my this passion to always lead me in my career and just help me make the right choices. And yes, why not transmit my passions to other students? I don't know, it would be wonderful. So, thanks you for your listening, and I hope that my experience has been enriching for you. So, thank you very much. Bye bye.